And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soul Survivor podcast. Me and Ryan back to recap Survivor 45, episode 7. What's up, Ryan?
Dylan, I'm doing great. I'm going to open up this podcast with a question for you. Who has been the star of Survivor 45 so far? Has it been A, Emily, B, Caleb, or C, D's big toe?
Wow, that's a tough question because D's big toe getting the job done recently. But it's funny because they showed us that earlier in the season. Who knew that it would get the job done later in the season? So
I mean, we said like the only reason they're showing us the thing about D's toe is if it's either this challenge or if it's the one where they do the thing only with their feet. I'm like, there's no way we're getting foot content and it doesn't come up in some other way again.
And maybe we get that later on. Maybe we get the foot challenge later on, and then D's big toe wins 2 challenges. How about that?
Well, see, but then you're going to get Twitter being like, "Oh, production rigged it. It's rigged for D." The script writers.
Oh man, yeah, funny stuff. But yeah, we had a very interesting episode this week. 2 vote outs. We had the typical final 10 format in final 12 for this episode, where 2 tribes split up into 6. 2 vote outs. We had Sifu go out with the first group, and then we had Caleb go out in the second group, which was a tough blow to the season for a lot of people, for sure. I know he's obviously a fan favorite. We loved him. But the very interesting part of this is that Sifu will not be on the jury since they are going to tribal first, and Caleb will be on the jury since they went to tribal second.
I'm sure you feel the same way. I just don't understand why they have so many arbitrary rules now where it's like, well, we're going to merge you, but you have to earn the merge. Now it's like, well, now you made the merge, but you have to earn the jury. Like, give Sifu the jury. I don't understand why they have to earn everything. And this poor man, just because Kelly couldn't outlast D, like now he doesn't get to be on the jury just because of that. So I just feel like it's unfair to Sifu. I know my friend doesn't like Sifu, so he's very happy about this, but I just think it's so unfair to make the merge officially and then not now make the jury. I just think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, don't merge that early if that's what the case is going to be. Like, that's kind of how I feel. Yeah, it seems weird to have some, like, there was something that he could do about it. It was like the fact that D outlasts Kelly on the poll means that he doesn't make the jury, and it was tough because he had that whole thing where he's like, it was one of my dreams to make the jury, and we all knew it wasn't going to happen. I think, like, based on, and we spoke about this last week, based on like the way the edit was going and the season was going, I think we knew that Sifu's days were numbered. But it is tough to see him not make the jury.
But Dylan, and not to be, this is obviously going to sound like very results oriented thinking, but like, imagine if it was flipped. Imagine if Kelly outlasts D, what happens? Caleb's not on the jury, and that's terrible if Caleb's not on the jury. So it's like, Jeff, you really was playing with fire here. I feel like this is not a great thing to, lose some of these great, like you lose Emily before jury, Caleb before jury, you lose Bruce before jury. Like you can't risk this happening, Jeff.
Yeah. That would have been absolutely brutal if Caleb
did
not make the jury. But let's discuss each individual tribal, then we'll go through the rest of the episode. So the first tribal, let's go through the groups first. Obviously, that would make more sense. But first group that goes to tribal, we had Bruce, Kendra, Kelly, Drew, Sifu, and Emily. And then group 2, we had Austin, D, Julie, Katurah, Jake, and Caleb. So Kelly wins immunity for group 1. D wins immunity for group 2. The group of Bruce, Kendra, Kelly, Drew, Sifu, Emily goes to tribal council first, where we have Sifu voted out. So, you kind of had this, everyone was, looking at, Sifu, and then, everyone kind of also was debating whether or not to get Bruce. I just knocked my mic over. Everyone else was debating on whether or not to get Bruce out, right? Was this the right time to take Bruce out? Everyone was wondering. He has an idol in his pocket. Everyone knows he has an idol in his pocket. They're going to have to blindside him in order to get him out. And he really seems to be rubbing a lot of people the wrong way. It's not just Katurah now. Kendra can't stand him, it seems like. Kelly is, he claims that she's his number one. So she's trying to keep him around for like as much longer as she could, but like she doesn't know how long she can keep him. Yeah. Ultimately, they decide to end up going with kind of the way that the easy vote or per se, and just vote Sifu out. Did you think that this was the right move to get Sifu out, or would you have tried to pull fast one on Bruce here?
So I guess when you have a situation like this, where you have these two groups that are broken up at the merge, and by the way, I think we discussed last week, much better to have this at final 12 instead of 10, because now you can get the great final 9 vote instead of, that being broken up. So very happy they did this, earlier. To answer your question, I think for most parties involved, it was the right move to keep Bruce and get rid of Sifu. For Kelly, obviously it makes perfect sense because Bruce sees her as his number one ally. He puts a lot of faith in her. And this is not a great comparison, but it's almost kind of like a Tony Trish thing where it's like, you see Kelly go into Bruce and be like, Bruce, you got to calm down. You got to like reel it in. And Cass has said on a podcast, like, why did Tony flame out in Game Changers? Because he didn't have a Trish or a Sarah to kind of like reel him in. Like players like that are very like, not crazy, but very, high energy. They need to have someone to kind of pull them back on the reins. So you see Kelly doing that. So for Kelly, Bruce is a shield. Bruce is a great, goat. Like whatever Kelly needs, Bruce can do that for her. So great for Kelly to keep him. Yes, Kendra's annoyed by him, but Bruce, I don't think is gunning for Kendra. He has a lot of other fish to fry. I really think he would target other Reba and probably was going to target Caleb before Kendra as well. Because again, she didn't know that Caleb was going to get voted out. And she has plenty of time to get rid of Bruce. It's final 10. You still have a lot of chances to get rid of Bruce, so it's good for her. Now, the only thing I would say, Dylan, is that I think for the Rebas, for Sifu and Drew, now Drew didn't have a lot of power there because he didn't have his allies, but I feel like, instead of targeting Bruce, and even though Drew votes for Sifu, I feel like they should have tried to maybe gang up on another Bella member, but I would say for the most part, it was the right move for this group to get rid of Sifu over Bruce.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looked like Drew kind of wanted to make a fast move on Bruce, but it wasn't going to happen with the way that the tribes were broken up, especially if Kendra and Kelly weren't in. I thought that Kendra and Kelly were always going to vote together here, so I don't think that Drew was going to be able to pull one of them away from the other. More so Kendra away from Kelly because Kelly was probably never going to vote Bruce. And I just want to point out, like, we've been so high on Kelly this season, and like this is one of the reasons why. I think that in Survivor, when you're able to kind of take your emotions out of the vote, and not vote emotionally, but rather vote and think of the game that's ahead of you, and that you're going to need Bruce going forward. And there's no reason to make if you're Kelly, there's no reason to go to listen to Kendra and make the move on Bruce now. When realistically you're at final 12 right now, you still have to get through all these votes in order to get to the final tribal council. You're going to need numbers in order to get there. So I think the fact that Bruce is such a huge number for her, there's absolutely no reason for her to get rid of Bruce. And like, sometimes you have to deal with the quote unquote annoying people in the season, in order to, if it's better for your game, simple as that.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I'm looking at my phone because I'm sure you saw Fishback's tweet, but like, I agree with him completely about this and why I think you and I really like Kelly a lot. And we loved her in the preseason too. Steven tweets that the best players, in my opinion, are the ones who can corral bickering people. So, Kendra and Bruce are at odds. He can kind of pull them in. They have competing agendas into a vote that benefits themselves. And you see her going to Kendra Kelly and being like, yeah, Bruce is annoying. I'm going to agree with you and empathize and be like, you're completely right. Bruce is annoying as hell, but here's why he can't go. And I'm going to explain to you why he can't go for you and for me. And that's the best type of player that not only benefits themselves with a move, but can bring people together and be like, this is why we have to vote this way for this reason. And no one sees you kind of pulling those strings. So I feel like that's a great example from Steven, why like we're loving what we're seeing from Kelly right now.
Right. And she's been great. She's been great. I currently think she's my favorite to win the season. Just based on how everything's playing out so far. And obviously that could change. But yeah, I was high on Kelly preseason. I was high on Kelly pre-merge, and I am still high on Kelly post-merge. So we'll see what happens here with her. Some other interesting things that happened with this first group.
Yeah.
So they had to go to the Lulu camp because they lost is it strictly because they lost, or is it because they just oh no, wait, I'm thinking, is it because Kelly lost, or is it because they just said that 6 was going there?
The tribe that was going to tribal first had to go
Right.
to
Okay. So what?
Lulu because the winning tribe was going to go to the sanctuary where good things happen. And then, yeah, so the tribe that lost first was going to go to Lulu. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So because of this, Drew did not have his bag. Sifu also did not have his bag. And as a result, Drew cannot use the safety without power. Sifu cannot use his shot in the dark. Sifu cannot use his fake idol that we saw him make. So, you know, I know there's a lot of mixed opinions on this all around the Survivor community. Like it's tough. It's tough for me, right? Because you can't just go bring your bag around to every challenge. You don't know what's going to happen. Like, and I think it's very suspicious if you're bringing your bag places. Like, why would you bring your bag to a random immunity challenge that's a non-merge immunity challenge? Like, you know what I mean? So it's tough. It's tough, right? It's like, to me, just like let them get their bags, and it just makes for it makes for better TV. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. Would you let them take their bags, or would you say they should just know to bring their bags every time with them? Like, what would you say?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I feel like you very split on this because, like I just mentioned with the whole jury thing with Sifu, I feel like production, even though we love Survivor, they sometimes just implement these rules like just for no reason, and it's like you can't be so harsh with these rules. Like, let them play, let them have their bags. They make the merge, make the jury. They have a lot of arbitrary rules. On the other hand, Dylan, I feel like after 45 seasons, you should just always have your bag because you never know what's going to happen. Yes, they didn't see. Now, last season, I think what I heard from Mike Bloom was, other than Bruce, who knows, Jam Jam won, they only saw up until the Josh vote last season. So they don't know what happened with Matt last season, where Matt didn't have his bag and Matt couldn't do his thing in that split tribal council. So they didn't know that, to be fair. But I feel like there's been many times in Survivor history where something happens, you don't have your bag, you swap, you have a split tribal. You can go back to Survivor Africa, where they get a note in Tree Mail saying 3 people meet up at this location, and that's when they had the first ever tribe swap. Like, you never know what can happen, so I think you should just always have your bag anyway. So I think that's why Drew should have had it. Now, what we can talk about while we're still in Group 1 is, can you explain to me, Dylan, how the hell Drew's name doesn't come up here as somebody who is a strong Reba member with Austin? Now, maybe they don't know that he's in a 4-person alliance with Julie and Dee, but Sifu's a wild card. Drew seems like a pretty, insulated player. The fact that Drew's name doesn't come up here is boggling to me. What are your thoughts?
I think the reason why is because everybody seemed to think that Sifu had an idol. I don't know if I don't know if that was part of their decision. Because again, they did place kind of all the votes on him, so maybe they didn't think he had an idol at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But that was kind of the talk the entire season. So maybe he built up some kind of reputation that we didn't see fully on TV. Is like, again, you're out on the island. I'm sure everything in the moment looks different than how it does on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you see Drew is like, the guy who's younger and maybe appears to be less threatening. Compared to Sifu, who has built up a reputation as somebody who searches for idols, may have had an idol at some point, may still have an idol. So I don't know. That's kind of my thought on it. And I don't think that everybody kind of knows, outside of the Reba members. I'm not sure everybody knows how much power Drew and Austin actually have in this game right now. So I do agree with you, but that's probably, if I'm like trying to like play devil's advocate and say, why was he not targeted? And like just say that they, instead of saying like they were wrong for not targeting him, like that's probably why, if I had to guess.
Well, again, this goes back to the biggest question of the season, which is like, the biggest question of the season for us has been like, why do the 4-person alliance, why do they think Sifu has an idol when they know that Austin has it? Now, again, maybe they think that there was a second one hidden. Maybe they're just, playing it up. Because obviously it's Drew. For Drew, it's beneficial. Like, if they're not saying my name and they're saying Sifu's name, I just want to survive tonight without my safety without power. So if they're going to go for Sifu, I'm just going to let it happen because I don't have a big connection with Sifu. So for Drew, he's not going to say anything. But because, like, to your point, I think most people in the game think Sifu has an idol, but Drew, again, should know Sifu doesn't have one, but all we've been seeing is scenes from Dee and Julie like, oh, we got to be careful of Sifu's idol. It's like, you should know he
Yeah.
doesn't have one. But that's been the biggest question of the season. Once one of those 4 people get voted out, we'll have to figure out in exit press, like, did they actually think Sifu had a second idol? But I don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah, that's a good point with Drew. But in terms of like back to the bag thing, you don't think it would be like suspicious at all to bring your bag every time? I guess now you could just make the argument like everybody should bring their bag because everybody has a shot in the dark. But
Yeah.
also like if you're bringing your bag and other people, it's still kind of painting you out as like you're bringing your bag everywhere. What do you bring your bag everywhere for? Like I don't know. So if like some people are doing it and some people are not, like if I was playing the game, I would be paranoid about bringing my bag if I had stuff because I wouldn't want people to suspect anything. So I think that like again, Drew, like he kind of got lucky in the fact that he didn't really need it. But Sifu got screwed with it. But like at the same time, like I don't know, if you're in Sifu's spot and you're kind of at the bottom of things, maybe you're not worried about that as much and just bring it anyway. But if you're Drew and you're in a pretty good spot in the game, like why try to give away like the fact that you like why give away the fact that you have stuff, So that's my thought on the bag thing and probably why like what crossed their mind in terms of that.
Yeah, I think that, going forward now, especially now, people can point to both last season and this season and be like, listen, 2 people could have brought their bags. They had something. So I'm just going to bring mine going forward. Like, yeah, you're right. It might be suspicious and maybe it'll be like peer pressure where like, if you're the only one bringing your bag, it doesn't look great. So maybe on a season, if most people bring their bags, everyone will do it. But if no one else is, maybe you should just leave it back. But like, I just think going forward, always bring your bag. Obviously, if people find it suspicious, you can do the whole thing where like, you put the idol in your pocket and like dump out your bag and be like, I don't have anything. Or you can do that thing that Denise did in Winners at War where like she held the idol in the bag in her hands and then like dumped out the rest. So like you can always bring it just to be safe and tell people I'm bringing it because you never know what's going to happen in this game. And then if someone happens to call you out and be like, all right, Dylan, drop your bag or empty your bag, you can kind of try to fake it that way. But like, I don't know. I just think you should have it going forward because Sifu revealed also in his exit press, Dylan, that he had that fake idol he made. Now, I feel like most people probably would have believed it considering everyone was talking about was Sifu's idol. So Sifu was saying in his exit press that I don't think it would have worked, but like he was like, I could have maybe tried to bluff with my fake idol and maybe try to like get the votes on me or Drew. Maybe Drew could have gone, but like he didn't have his bag either. So
yeah,
there you go.
Right. Yeah, but all right, group 1, that wraps it up. Let's go to group 2. All right, and obviously Bruce. One more thing about group 1. Obviously, yeah. Bruce did not play his idol, so he still has that.
Yep.
Sifu does not make the jury, as we said before. Okay, group 2. So we have once again, just to recap: Austin D, Julie, Katurah, Jake, and Caleb. Now this was the fully interesting, way more interesting tribal group of 6 here. So we have D, Julie, and Austin, original Reba members in an alliance this entire game. They want to vote out Caleb, and they want to bring in Jake in order to do that. But Jake, he really wants Caleb to stay in this game because he feels that Caleb is a number for Belo, and he feels that Caleb, more importantly for himself, is a huge shield going forward, which I told you that last week when we were on this podcast. I said, I don't really feel like Caleb's going to make it much further in this game, but I think that there is reason to keep him around, especially if you're a player like Jake or one of the other bigger guys on the season who feels like they need a shield. And that's exactly how Jake saw it. So they, he wanted to keep him around. And then the wild card was really Katurah, who was kind of originally we all thought she was going to be with Caleb. And then we had spilling of information that eventually leads to complete chaos. So Ryan, I will throw it to you. What was your thought on Caleb and Jake telling Katurah about Bruce's idol, which ultimately seemed to be the reason why Katurah flipped?
Got it. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll talk then about did Katurah make the right choice? But you're asking right now, was it the right move for them to tell her? At first glance, Clearly not. Clearly not the right choice. But they're correct though, because they're so right that if you let Austin get his foot in the door first and he tells her, hey, Bruce has an idol, whether he tells her at camp, whether they tie the vote, and then he tells her before they revote, hey, by the way, Bruce has an idol, that looks even worse. That all but guarantees she flips on you, because now it's like, you didn't only just not tell me, and I was the only one on Bello who didn't know about it. You went and told Austin and by proxy Drew that he has one. You really don't trust me then. So that would have all but guaranteed she was going to flip. By them telling her beforehand, she at least was like, I got to decide, do I want to go with Austin, Drew, and Austin, Julie, and D, or do I go with Caleb and Jake? So it was the right move because Austin and Drew knew. And Austin and Drew only knew because Caleb told them. So my first thought, Dylan, was like, because who was the one that proposed it? Was Jake the one that brought it to Caleb, or did Caleb bring it to Jake? I think it was Jake, but I don't remember.
I believe Jake brought it to Caleb.
Okay.
But that's kind of been Caleb's game this entire time. Like, he's been playing all sides, and he's been giving like not irrelevant information, but information that doesn't really pertain to him that he knew from other players to other. He's giving that to other players to create a relationship, right? So it was like he kind of continued to do that, but this was the first time it really backfired and didn't work. And I keep trying to think, like, clearly it wasn't the right move on the surface. Like, it ends up getting him voted out, but like in theory, I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought it seemed like in theory a good idea, but now that I think back on it, like seeing what happened and looking hindsight on it, like if they don't say anything about the idol, like what are the odds that Austin does tell Katurah about it? Like what would have been the odds of that? Especially because it seems like that they were sold. If you looked at what Reba was trying to do, based on what Dee and Julie said, they thought that they were going to get Jake to flip over, and they didn't really say anything about Katurah. So the fact that they weren't focused on Katurah and more focused on trying to flip Jake to vote Caleb, that kind of signals to me that maybe Austin wouldn't have even brought up the idol to Katurah, and therefore, like, because of that, they didn't even need to say anything in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, there's no guarantee that Austin would have brought it up. You just never know. Like, again, you never know if at camp, but whether it's after this vote or before this vote, you never know if they're going to have a conversation, and Katurah's, as always, venting about Bruce, like, God, Bruce is so annoying. I'm so pissed about Bruce. And then maybe not even on purpose, maybe Austin like accidentally is like, yeah, he's annoying, and he's also very powerful because of his idol. And then Katurah's like, wait, what? So there's a chance that whether it's on purpose or not, she was going to find out at some point anyway. So they had to beat Austin to it. But yeah, no, because at first I was like, Jake, this is going to blow up in your face if you reveal this to her now, because timing is everything, and this is going to look really bad. You should have told her earlier. But like you pointed out, Dylan, I kind of forgot that, Caleb was the one that told Austin and Drew about Bruce's idol. So really it's Caleb's fault they're in the spot to begin with. Jake kind of only just furthered it. But no, I think to answer your question, ultimately, it was the right move for them to tell her. They obviously should have told her a lot earlier, because it just looks worse if Austin tells her.
Yeah, and I think it looked worse for Jake as well, because like she was like, "Is that why you were digging for the rings?" And he was like, "Yeah." Like maybe he should maybe he should have. I don't know. Like that was a pretty big lie for him to be like caught in, Whereas like Caleb was just like, I knew the information. It was like, Jake, like we saw you like exaggerating it to me, exaggerating the lie to me to fake me out. So I think that like really didn't help things. And now I want to get to the more important part of the whole big picture here, which is, was this the right move for Katurah to ultimately flip and go with Reba? I have my thoughts. I'm curious to hear yours.
Yeah. So I was texting your brother about this Wednesday night, and at first I think we both were like, terrible move. You gave even more power to the 4-person alliance. You had a shot tonight to take out both Drew and Julie or Austin. You had a chance to take out 2 of those alliance members. You struck out on both. You now head into Final 10. They have their 4. They still maybe have Emily as a 5th, so they could potentially control half the votes. Bad move, leaving Reba intact. Horrible move. Then I'm reading Twitter, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm thinking more about it. And I feel like in hindsight, Dylan, what I'm realizing is like Katurah probably had to make this move because like it's one thing if it was a 5-person split and she flips over and it's like 3 versus 2. We could argue and be like, it was a little hasty on you, Katurah. Belle is going to be mad at you. Kelly will be pissed and maybe you'll be the next target. But you can't expect Katurah to go to rocks potentially in a 3-3 split. These people basically that she was aligned with, Jake and Caleb, who she had trust in, especially Caleb over Jake, just kind of lied to her, have been lying to her for a while, and told the other side information that she should have known first. And if there's a tie vote 3-3, Jake thinks Austin will flip. If Austin doesn't flip, are we expecting her to go to rocks for people that she should have trusted? I don't think so. So I think for her, she had to do this. But to answer your question, I don't think it was the optimal move. I think between voting out Julie or Caleb, voting out Caleb to avoid a 3-3 rock split is the right move. I think the optimal move would have been getting Jake out here. Now, okay. I don't think it was ever going to happen. I think Austin, D, and Julie were always going to be targeting Caleb. But Caleb and Katurah had a really good bond. I think she would have been better served being like, hey, guys, I know you try to pull in Jake as a 4th to get Caleb out tonight. He just brought everything to me. Do you want to flip it on Jake? And I think they would have done it. But, like, I don't know. That's my thoughts. What about your thoughts?
So, yeah, and that you brought up a good point. Like, the ultimate plan of Jake here was to bring Katurah in to force a 3-3 split between Julie and Caleb. And then once it was a 3-3 split, he thought that he was going to be able to convince Austin to flip and not go to rocks. And that was how they were going to get by with the vote. Mm-hmm. So, honestly, like, and then we had this whole flash forward situation where we saw some of the votes at Tribal Council, which was interesting. I know a lot of people had their thoughts on it. I personally thought it was bizarre, but I don't really mind it at all. Anyway, back to the vote. 3-3 split. He thinks he's going to be able to convince Austin to flip on the revote because he's a cautious or scared player and won't go to rocks. Because ultimately, if you're Austin, why are you going to rocks at this point in Final 12 when you're set up so well? So I think like Jake was a pretty good salesman to me here. Like I thought his plan was going to work for a while. Now I was listening to Kelly Wentworth on Rob Cesternino's podcast, and she brought up a very good point that if Katurah feared going the rocks, and that was her main reason for flipping, and I don't think it was necessarily her main reason, but that was a major reason why she wanted to flip. She wanted to avoid rocks. Why not originally vote Julie, wait to see if Austin does flip, and then if he says, I'm staying strong, I will go to rocks, I'm not flipping, then she could just flip her vote on Caleb and be like, all right, I'm not going to rocks, I'm flipping my vote on Caleb, and that's how it goes. And I think now thinking that through, I think the reason why she chose not to do that is because then you kind of almost burn the bridge on the other side as well. Because like ultimately she would have voted originally for Julie. And then once Austin didn't flip, she would have flipped back to Caleb. Yeah. So maybe her thought process was that if I do that, how is Reba going to trust me going forward if I literally put the vote on Julie with the intention of Austin flipping, and then I only flipped because Austin wouldn't. So maybe that was her thought process of why she didn't do that. But yeah, do I think it was the right move for her? My immediate, again, you got to do you got to do what you got to do to stay safe in this game and not go to rocks at Final 12. But my gut reaction is that it was not the right move for her.
Okay.
And I know we saw a lot of stuff in the preview of next week about potentially an all women's alliance. And maybe, some people speculated maybe that was kind of in the works before this episode even started or next episode even started. Therefore, like she thought, okay, I'll have all these people if I just get through this one vote and get out Caleb. So I don't have to worry about having Caleb as an alliance. I have all them as an alliance. That being said, I don't know how much I buy the all women's alliance. One, they could just be doing it for the preview just to promote next episode. 2, it could be just a 1 episode thing. So how much do I actually buy that going forward? And even if there is an all women's alliance, do I think it'll benefit Katurah?
No.
Maybe for a vote or two, but is she going to be? She's going to be at the bottom of the totem pole with that group. So I thought that her best path forward, she needed to keep Caleb in the game because that was her number one ally. Like, and ultimately, like, how is she going to get numbers in this game? She's not. So I thought that was tough for her to kind of flip on her number one ally there. And I think a lot of people are saying, like, yeah, she technically, like, kind of had to do it because of the whole rocks thing, but there was a way to do it, I think, where she could have tried her best to save Caleb. Because I think that maybe, just maybe, you know, I mentioned the whole thing that I just mentioned before about had she placed the vote on Austin, or had she placed the vote on Julie and then waited to see if Austin flipped, maybe she didn't want to. I said that maybe she didn't want to burn that bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Was potentially burning that bridge worth it to try and keep Caleb in the game? I think maybe. But yeah, I think her voting out Caleb was honestly shocking. Like, you don't see people with no alliance or no allies vote out their top alliance or top ally. It's tough. I thought it was a tough move.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think the reason why you brought up a great point, why we don't see people voting out their top ally, like, why is that's so stark for us? Because you don't expect that. And I think it also ties into your point about, like, what Kelly said. I didn't actually consider that point. Like, what would have been the benefits of voting with Jake and Caleb first, 3-3, then you flip, because all it does is possibly get Julie upset. Even if you end up being with her, it's like, I don't care. You wrote my name down regardless. I think the reason is, I think she was just hurt. I just think she really had trust in those guys, especially Caleb, and she lost that trust. And for me, and maybe I'm bringing, like, my psych and my HR into this, but it's like, you know, when you talk about motivation, they say motivation is almost like a multiplicative equation, Dylan, where it's like you can have the ability, you can have the opportunity to perform. If you don't have the motivation, the performance is not going to happen. It's zero, because it's all multiplicative. Because if you have 30 times 30 times 0, that's going to be 0. The performance will not happen. Even if you have all the ability in the world and all the opportunity, if you have no motivation, it's not going to happen. I feel like by the same extension, I think trust is a multiplicative equation. I think you could have all the relationship with Caleb. You could like him. You could think he's great for your game. You could really see him as a shield. But if he betrays that trust in you, you can't work forward you can't work together going forward, because, and there's a saying about this too. It's like trust can take years to build and take seconds to just destroy. And I really think in that moment, yes, you're right. Maybe there would have been some benefits to trying to see if Austin was going to flip potentially. But after she learns she was left out of the idol search, they were making up stories to leave her even further out of the idol search. And then they're telling other people in the other alliance about the idol before her. I think in that her mind, she's like, I can't trust you guys again. I'm done. So I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I think those are very fair points. And, like, I have to see what happens in future episodes and we could discuss after next week's episode. We could even come back to this and be like, all right, well, based on where Katurah is right now, like, what do we think of last week's move? Like, I think it'll probably take a couple episodes for us to figure out if it was in fact the right move. But yeah, we have a 4-2 vote. Caleb's voted out. And my brother brought up a great point. He's like, is this the start of the Jake arc where he just wants to make a move every single tribal council and just cannot make a move for the entire season? Is this the start of Jake's Owen arc? Is it maybe it is. Maybe it is.
It could be. I would hate that personally. Both A, Jake on the show, but B, for my draft. But hey, you know what? The arc that I hope Jake is currently on is a Chris Daughtry arc, because the irony is not lost upon me, Dylan, that we are seeing a preview of a women's alliance. We'll see if it happens. I mean, there's a reason there's only been 2 women's alliances in Survivor history. There's a reason for that. And it's ironic that Jake says in his preseason press, what former player or winner are you most like? He goes, I could be a good Chris Daughtry. Well, what happens in Vanuatu? Chris Daughtry is in the final 8 with 7 women or whatever, and then Chris Daughtry ends up winning. So you never know. We could see if Jake is on his Chris Daughtry arc instead of his Owen arc. We'll see what happens.
That is a very interesting point, but it's like I look forward to next week, and I say to myself, all right, let's break it down. So there's 10 people left. Okay, you got supposed women's alliance forming. They have the numbers now 6-4, right? So they have the women that are left that would, I guess, be in that alliance would be Kelly, Kendra, Dee, Julie, Katura, and Emily, right? And then on the other side, you have the guys left. So you have Austin, you have Drew, you have Bruce, and you have Jake, right? I think one of the very interesting things about this is the women need to be careful forming this women's alliance if they try it, because they could have the numbers, but all the power in the game lies with the guys, right? The two idols are currently in the guys' possession.
Yeah.
Drew has a safety without power, which could be used, I believe, for the last time next week. The only power that or I should say, the only advantage that any girl has in this game left is the fact that Kelly has half an amulet, right? So I think that they need to be careful with this women's alliance, because it could get blown up pretty fast if the men play their cards right.
So here's what I think. I think Kelly's playing a great game. We'll have to see what Kelly wants to do, because it sounds like Kelly has a lot of sway within that group. I mean, Caleb said before he left that he was the one person who kind of clocked everyone's good with Kelly. Everybody wants to work with Kelly. So if she, and again, we're assuming, we don't know if this women's alliance is actually going to happen. It was in the preview. It could just be to placate Katura. We don't know. But if it does end up happening, Kelly will probably decide, do I want to go with the girls, or I still don't want to get rid of Bruce yet. I still don't want to get rid of Jake yet. I want to keep them safe. So I'm going to flip this vote. I also think, Dylan, the one person we had not discussed at all so far.
Yeah, I was going to say,
go ahead.
Also, a major concern for this women's alliance is Emily going to go with the girls over going with Drew and Austin, she's continuously said she wants to kind of just move her game along with the rest of the way. So I don't think she would do that, right? And then all of a sudden you have, all it takes in a 6-4 is one person to flip over and you have a 5-5. So you never know. And then obviously things can get crazier with Drew's safety without power. Maybe he doesn't use it, but yeah, Emily, I think, will be tough to sway there for
Emily. Probably, Kelly is probably the person with the most influence in the game left. Kelly has the most influence. Drew and Austin have the most firepower, but Emily could be the most important piece on the board, because she can go with the women's alliance if that is happening. She can go with Austin and Drew because they made a really tight bond on that swap tribe. So she can go with Drew and Austin. She maybe could be driving a wedge at some point between Austin and Drew and Dee and Julie. We don't know. Because I could very easily see Drew and Austin being savvy players, being like, we want to work with Dee and Julie, but we can't go too far because they're a tight two. Let's bring in Emily and cut off Julie and Dee's relationship. Plus, Emily could be like going after Katura next week because you took out Caleb. Now, Emily said on the episode famously, like, I recognize Caleb will have to go at some point because I can't stick my neck out for him. But she could easily target Katura next week for getting rid of Caleb already. So Emily could be the most important piece on the board. And at this point, I don't want to predict too much because I feel like it's so hard to predict these things with the edit. But like, who's going after Emily now? I feel like you got to pencil in Emily for a while, because at this point, she's the last Lulu member left. Lulu has now broken a record, the fastest tribe to be broken up and to be decimated to 1, even faster than Oolong has. So Lulu now has that unfortunate distinction. So at this point, Emily should be sitting very pretty, and she has a lot of influence in the game. My question is, Dylan, is Kelly going to realize that?
So I said last week that, I believe it was last week or 2 weeks ago, that my prediction for the final 3 is Kelly, Emily, and this is the third is, I think those 2 I'm going to predict for sure.
It's hard.
The third I think could go either way. I think it's going to probably be like maybe a Julie or like a Kendra, or like,
I was going to say maybe something like Kendra.
Yeah. Right. But so I think that ultimately, like, the game will come down to those 2 players. The question is, like, it's tough, right? Sometimes, like when players go to the final three, it's because they plan to go to the final three, and then they end up going to the final three together. I'm not sure I ever see a time in this game where Kelly and Emily will be working together. So, is it possible for both of them to end up getting to the final three? Yes, but maybe more unlikely than it would have been had they been working together. So, I don't really know, but I kind of feel this, and maybe the whole women's alliance thing is previewing it. I kind of feel like we could maybe get a all women's final three this year in this season. So we'll see. Again, it would take a lot of firepower being blown up for that to happen, it seems. But we'll see what happens. You would have to think that one of these episodes, sooner rather than later, Bruce is probably going to be targeted, right? Because I think that the more you go on in this game, the more Bruce will be inclined to use his idol. So I think that, if you let it sit, like last week was probably too soon. Now we're headed to final 10.
Yeah.
Maybe you give it one more week and then maybe you do it at final 9. But I think if you kind of let it go past final 9, then Bruce is going to be more inclined to use that idol if he feels unsafe, especially if he laid it on.
So let's pretend again, because I know some people also don't see the previews. So let's just pretend for a second that we never saw the previews. Let's pretend we don't know if there is a women's alliance, if it's real, fake, happened before this vote, whatever. If we're coming back to camp to final 10, how are people viewing Katurah? Because obviously Bruce, what's Bruce's reaction? Because he doesn't like Katurah, but he also wants to target Caleb. So is he now happy that Katurah made this move because she got out Caleb for him and he didn't have to do it, but Caleb's on the jury and Caleb doesn't like Bruce? Or is Bruce like, oh, she went against Belo, I now want to get her out even more?
Yeah.
And now it's going to be once again, is Kelly going to be, like Steven said, the player who can bring in Bruce and what's her name? Bring in Bruce and Katurah and be like, hey guys, we have the numbers. Belo has 5, Reba has 4, Emily's 1. We can't risk taking ourselves out and giving Reba the power to go with Emily. Is Kelly going to be able to hold Belo together, or are they just so fractured now? I'm really curious what's going to happen, even pretending if this women's alliance doesn't happen. What is now the structure of Belo with Jake being exposed, Bruce and Katurah going at it, Kendra doesn't like Bruce, and Kelly's like, I'm trying to hold everyone together, and I can't hold everyone together.
It's tough for me to say. I think if you're Bruce, you're inclined to get her. If you're Bruce, you're inclined to vote her out even more, in my opinion.
Who, Katurah?
Katurah, yeah. And I guess you're not going to blame Reba for you're against Reba anyway. You're not going to be like, all right, Reba needs to go because they voted out. First of all, you're against Caleb yourself. You're going to expect Reba to make that move. If Bruce is thinking about the other group right now, who do I think they're targeting? Okay, Reba's probably targeting Caleb. You expect that to happen, but do you expect Bruce? Not Bruce. Does Bruce expect Katurah to be the one that does it? Probably not. I think that he is for sure kind of inclined to keep Belo strong. And I think, but other than Katurah, we've seen him and Katurah at odds the whole season. I think he's just going to be more inclined to do it, especially with her making a big move like that. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. But I mean, you can't read into the edit too much, but I think the edit has painted the picture that eventually Katurah is going to be the one to vote out Bruce. But we'll see what happens there. It'll be interesting because I thought this Katurah Bruce arc was going to come to an end 3 episodes ago, and it's still going strong. So we'll see.
The other question I have, Dylan, is because Sifu wasn't on the jury, I'm assuming that the second group that went to tribal, we didn't get shown that they were aware Sifu got voted out, because in all these other split tribals in the new era at Final 10,
there's somebody sitting there, right?
There's someone sitting there. So Jeff says, as you see, Roxroy voted out at the tribal council. Who else was voted out? Nasir voted out, whatever it was. They didn't say Sifu voted out. Because here's my question to you. Would the first tribal council have changed anything for the second one? For example, we don't know if they were told Sifu got voted out, but let's just pretend he says Sifu voted out, although he's not in the jury, so it doesn't matter as much, but he's voted out. What would have happened potentially if Bruce got voted out over Sifu? Does that change anything? I'm really curious to know the order of operations where it's like if someone else had gotten voted out, would that have changed what happened in the second tribal council?
Ah, that's interesting, right? Because the whole thing with Bruce's idol,
Exactly.
if his idol is flushed from the game, does it still
Doesn't matter
matter?
as much
Does it
anymore.
matter
Yeah.
as much? That is interesting. I would still guess that based on like the whole trust factor, it probably still does go
Mhm.
go similar way, but that is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna guess that because we didn't see it on the show, they weren't told Sifu got voted
Right,
out.
right. I
But yeah,
think
I agree with you. I don't think even if Bruce had left, I don't think it would have changed anything. But I don't know. We'll see.
yeah. All right. Anything else that you want to talk about? Happy that they brought back the poll challenge.
Love get a grip. Great
Um,
challenge.
love a classic challenge like that. And it's funny because I saw an old clip like circulating on Twitter of like Parvati and Amanda like doing the challenge from like whenever Micronesia or Heroes Villains, whichever one it was. I think it was Micronesia, but whichever one it was, if you look back at that challenge, when it was ran all those years ago, the footholds in the
Or-
poll used to be significantly bigger. So
Yeah.
the challenge would last hours and hours and hours, and they would just stand up there. Whereas now they make the foothold so small, so the challenge. They're like, I forgot who tweeted about this, but I saw a tweet out there this week, and it was like the old like you see the sky move, and then Jeff goes, and then all of a sudden Jeff goes, "It's been 17
I
minutes," and
know.
you're like, "Oh, only 17 minutes. This used to be a 3-hour challenge
I
back in the
know.
day." So I thought that was funny. But as you've seen in the old clip, like there's a reason why they switch it to make the footholds smaller because you could really stay on that pole for as long as you want when the footholds are that big.
Yeah.
So I think that like they need to fix it to the point where it's somewhere like in between that, where the footholds may not be like that big, but like also big enough to the point where you could hang up there a little bit longer than just like 17 minutes to the point where they're like grasping for their lives.
Yeah, and like you said, I love Get a Grip. I'm happy they brought it back. And yeah, the footholds used to be a lot bigger. Even with the big footholds, we've always said for this challenge, or the chimney sweep challenge, where they're in between the two walls, like the guy or girl, the bigger your foot is, like the more surface area you have, the tougher it's going to be. Ironically, though, Dylan, I just looked this up. Would you believe that this challenge has been run 10 times, including this season? Even though in Winners at War there were 2 winners, there have been more male than female winners, actually, which actually surprised me. It's
Interesting.
been 3. Well, if you include the, I'm sorry, no, this time 10 times the challenge was run, but there's been 12 winners because of the 2 winners for each. There's been 6 female winners and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now it's 6-6 because D and Kelly won. But before tonight, it was actually more skewed to the guys, which is actually pretty interesting. But no, I mean, I love seeing a classic challenge like this. Always happy that they'll bring back more. People were happy they brought back Last Gasp a few seasons ago. So always love seeing them go back to the well. Further proof that the season has been more classic to us than the last few years. And Dylan, looking ahead to next week, the auction's back.
The auction is back next week. And yeah, I do want to like point out that I do think that, and again, we have a lot of the season left, so I don't want to like jump the gun too much, but I do think that so far, even with the quits at the beginning, like season 45 is probably going to end up being the best New Era season so far. I feel pretty good about that with all the moves that we've seen so far, and with the way that the end game looks like it could be shaping up, or I should say the final 10. But yeah, I feel pretty confident in that, and I think it's a good step in the right direction for Survivor after definitely some tumultuous times.
Yeah, I think they figured out the formula. Obviously, we're never going to get like old seasons back again. This game has evolved too much. Now, if they dial back on the journeys and the sob stories and the advantages, we can get more closer to it. But like, obviously, we're not going to have season 4 or season 10 again. But clearly, they're on the right track. They figured some things out. And like you said, I think 45 will end up being the best one. My quick question to you before we get to a question in the chat is, how do you think, or do you think they're going to change up the auction next week? Because if people have forgotten, the reason why they kind of canceled the auction back in season 30 was the contestants kind of broke it, where ever since they started putting advantages at the end of auctions, you would have 4 or 5 people just holding their money and being like, I'm not going to bid, I'm going to wait for the advantage. And you only have like 2 or 3 people bidding on food, which wasn't as fun. So everyone was just saving it for the advantages. And then number 2, Shireen broke the auction because she realized if you bid $20 on a loved one letter, anyone can buy it for the same price. So it used to be like, oh, I'm going to bid 200 for my loved one letter, 300. But now it's like, oh, if I bid $40 for it, anyone can buy it at that price. So the contestants kind of broke the auction a little bit. So I'm curious to ask you, what do you want to see next week in the auction? How should it change? Like, what do we think about that next week?
I think there's going to be like a set of rules that comes along with it. I think that they're probably going to force everybody to bid on something, right? I think there'll be a rule like if you don't bid on something, then something happens that's not good. I don't know what that would be, but like they're going to basically make, or just like you have to bid on something. Maybe there's no like punishment if you don't, but like you have to bid on, everybody has to bid on something at some point. And this way it's like, you know, I don't know. There has to be a way to make sure that people aren't saving for advantages.
My prediction, because in a perfect world, I would say no advantage at the auction, just only food. But there's going to be an advantage.
There's going to be an advantage somewhere. I'm curious, how about this? What if they like trick them? And what if there is an advantage that is hidden like under one?
I was going to say, yeah.
And not actually like in the food per se, or like or as part of the like auction. Yeah.
No, I was you just stole it from me. I was going to say that like because they can't not have an advantage in 45, just knowing Jeff. So I think, like you just pointed out, whether it's a roast chicken, whether it's, you know, like wings and beer, whatever it is, I guarantee you there's going to just be food, and then it's going to end and people are going to be like, there was no advantage. What happened? And what's going to be shown either in a flashback or shown in real time is you're going to buy food, you're going to open up your napkin, and then it's going to be in there. I think that's the best way to fix the auction, is to like have an advantage, but don't make it so obvious.
Right. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But let's get to this question. Adrienne wants to know, who do you guys think are top contenders so far? All right, I'll just flat out say my winner rankings if I had to pick. Sure. I would say winner rankings for me right now. This is an order of like, I guess, most likely to win the season. I think that Kelly is number 1 for me. And then I'm going to say it's tough. It's tough. The number 2 spot is where it gets tough for me. I think that 2 is somebody from Red. I think I probably put Austin at 2. I probably put Austin at 2, Emily at 3, D at 4, and Drew at 5. I think that's where I'm at right now in terms of like top 5.
So I would have a very similar list. I would say for me, Kelly would be a top contender. Emily, just based on her arc alone, and also based on her being in the in the least threatening spot right now, it would be 2 for me, Emily and Kelly. Austin and Drew, to me, try not to base it too much on Survivor history, but to me, they scream like big player taken out at like 8, or like Austin Fallen Angel at 4. So I think Austin has a lot of power in this game. I think Austin is more insulated than Drew is. Austin just has a really great social game. So I think Austin I could put at 3, but it would not surprise me if he gets clipped at the end. But I would say to your point, Kelly, Emily, probably Austin. I was going to say D, but I feel like if D wins a lot of these challenges, her threat level is just going to keep going up. But I would say those are my 3, Kelly, Emily, Austin. I feel like, I mean, maybe I'm being too hopeful. I feel like I could still see a world where Jake is like a dark horse candidate. Jake's like the underdog that somehow squeaks to the end and wins, but like he's got a rough road ahead of him. But that's what I think.
Yeah, and then one more question here. I agree with most of what he said. But one more question here. Adrienne wants to know, if you were Katurah in the moment, would you risk going to Rocks or vote Caleb out? And we went over this a lot before, but I would say that if I were in her spot, I would probably test Rocks in terms of like, see if I would vote Julie, see if Austin will flip. And then if he doesn't, then I would not be willing to go to Rocks. I would just flip my vote on Caleb just to save myself and then deal with the aftermath after that. But I think that, in my opinion, saving your number one ally or somebody who at least would trust you going forward was worth potentially like breaking trust on the other side by voting that way. If that makes sense. So that's what I would do.
And I think what we were saying earlier, Adrian, was like in a perfect world to keep Caleb as an ally, but also your trust was broken. In a perfect world, maybe flipping the vote onto Jake for Katurah would have been best, but we don't think that Austin, D, and Julie would have budged on that. So maybe it wasn't going to happen anyway. But yeah, if I'm Katurah and maybe I'm the scared and cautious player that Jake is talking about instead of Austin, I'm not going to Rocks. Like, I just don't want my fate in the game. Maybe I have bad luck. I don't want my fate in the game being tied to random chance. So I would hope that I would ride or die for my ally. I'm sure I would ride or die for you, Dylan. But like, it would need to be a perfect scenario for me. Otherwise, I'm not going to Rocks. I feel I would be like, yes, Dylan's point. Maybe I would test the waters first and see what would happen before a revote. But I'm flipping. There's no way I'm going to Rocks on purpose.
All right, so that'll do it for today's episode 7 recap, Survivor 45. Happy that we will see everyone back next week around the same time on Sunday, and we'll see what happens this week. I'm excited for it.
We got the auction next week. I'm very excited.
Yep.
Grab your torches and head back to camp.
Good night.